Hi, this is Jayanam with a video to show you my workflow for creating a game asset. I create it with Blender, then bring it into Subtance Painter and finally import it into Unity. So let's start here with Blender 2.8. And this is the stylized tombstone model that we created in the previous parts. I have a low poly and a high poly version. The first thing we have to do is to export the models as FBX. So I select tombstone_HP, which is the high poly mesh. And then I go to File, Export FBX. I'm going to export to this folder and I select Mesh, Apply Transform and Selected Objects. This is the first export. I call it tombstone_HP for high poly. And then I press Export FBX. This takes a while for it's a high poly mesh. Okay, now we have to do the exact same thing for the low poly mesh, so I select it, and again go to File, Export FBX and use the same parameters as for the high poly mesh. The only thing that differs is the name. I call it tombstone_LP. Okay, and now that we have the low poly and the high poly mesh exported as FBX, I open Subtance Painter. This is version 2019.2.3, and here we go ahead and create a new project under File, New. The template I keep as is and press the button Select, and in the opening dialog you have to select the low poly FBX. Then press the OK button and the low poly mesh is imported. Here you can see it with a smooth shading. And this is because we defined it in Blender and you should set it to smooth. Okay, the next step is to bake the mesh maps. You find this here under the texture set settings. And in this dialog you have to add the high poly mesh tombstone HP to the high definition meshes. This will bake the details of the high poly to the low poly, and be sure to set the max distance to a higher value. I used here 0.03 and I uncheck ID because we don't need an ID map. Alright, so let's bake the textures, and as you can see in this new version, the baking process is displayed in this dialog, and the baked maps can also be seen on the mesh. Okay, everything is baked, and the result looks pretty good. And we can go ahead and drag a material into the layer stack. I don't do a complex texturing now, because this is just for demonstration, so I use a predefined material, a stylized one, and drag it onto the mesh. And as you can see, it is added to the layer stack and also appears on the mesh. For this material I disable the cracks layer. They are included in the smart material, but I just want to use the cracks that we sculpted into the high poly mesh. Okay, to be able to use the textures, the normal map, albedo and the roughness information, we have to export these maps. So I select File, Export Textures, and in this export dialog I have to select the folder to which I want to export, and I select this one to which we already exported the FBX files. And then you have to define a config. I'm using Unity, but I don't use the metallic. For this material I use the specular setup, but it's just a personal preference. Here you can see the textures that will be exported, the albedo, the specular and the normal map. There's no emissive channel, so the emission map won't be exported. That's it for Subtance Painter, and now I will show you how to bring all this stuff into the Unity game engine. I start the latest version of the Unity Hub and create a new project with Unity 2019.3 beta. I create a 3D project with extras, and this means that presets and example content is included and the new post-processing stack is used. Then I give the project a name, for example Tombstone, and press the button Create. Opening the project for the first time takes a while, but I speed this up a bit. Alright, here's the scene with the example content. But I remove these assets so that we have this base to drag our model into, and the next thing I do is to reduce the size of the gizmos so that we can better see the content. The next thing I do is to open the Windows Explorer with the folder to which we exported the FBX files and the maps, so that we can easily drag this content into the Unity editor. I select the maps and drag them into the materials folder. Here you can see them: albedo, normal map and specular map. And after that I select the assets folder and drag the FBX file, the tombstone_LP FBX, which contains the low poly mesh, into this folder. As you can see, it's straightforward and pretty simple. The tombstone is imported, and now we can extract the materials from the FBX. We haven't defined the material in Blender, but there is a default one that we can extract into the materials folder. It is called no name, but I renamed this to tombstone. Alright, before we start dragging the textures to the material slots, I set the shader of the tombstone material to the specular setup. And now we can drag the textures into the slots. First the albedo texture, then the normal map. For this we have to press the button Fix Now to mark it as a normal map. And the last map is the specular. Okay, and now I drag the model, the tombstone, into the scene. It's a bit too large, at least compared to the other models, but as you can see, the textures are already applied. I select the scale tool and scale it down a bit. Okay, now I rotate it, and as you can see, the textures look pretty good. There are no artifacts or rendering issues. I select the camera now and adjust the view, press the Ctrl Shift and F key to adjust the camera to the current viewport. And then I start the game and maximize the view so that we can fully see the model and the material. Okay guys, this is my workflow to turn a high poly mesh into a game asset and bring it into a game engine. If you find it useful and you like my channel, then don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And it would be great if you support me by being my patron, because this really helps me creating more tutorials. Thanks for watching guys, and see you in the next one.